an artist, a modern quilter, a QuiltCon winner, and so much more. I was very excited to meet today's guest in person at QuiltCon to chat with her in front of her 3 quilts in the show, one of which won its category. Today, I'll have a chat with Tara Lee Evans. Hello and welcome to the Quilter on Fire podcast. I'm Brandy Maslowski, a former firefighter turned quilt professional. As a quilt teacher, speaker, and judge, I travel the globe to bring quilters more joy and less overwhelm. Not too long ago, the quilty life I now lead was just a dream. After many lessons and a lot of hard work, I've transitioned from juggling a day job and a quilting business on the side to becoming a full-time quiltpreneur. I started the Quilter on Fire podcast to create a vibrant community of quilters, artists, and makers. Each episode brings you inspiring stories, insights, and the pure joy of guests from all over the world. If their stories uplift you and spark joy, you're in the right place. Let's dive in and ignite that creative fire within you. My guest today is Tara Evans of Tara Lee Quiltery. She is an artist who didn't just find quilting, she claimed it as her medium after years of creating in all kinds of ways. From painting to photography to raising 4 children, her creative path has been anything but straight, and I love that. Now she's known for bold, graphic, modern quilt designs that really stop you in your tracks. With over 30 quilt patterns designed and in her shop and a passion for originality and inclusivity, she's bringing something fresh to the quilting world with her bold designs and meaningful storytelling. So let's explore the story of Tara Evans. Tara, welcome to the show.
Brandy, that was such a nice intro. I feel like, well, you said everything. We can just end the episode now.
So. We can just end now. Yeah. No, you are a true sweetheart in the quilting world. You are bringing wonderful stories to the table. I was so excited to meet you at QuiltCon. So I'm so happy to have you on the show. So let's start by taking a look back at where you got started. So when do you first remember putting stitch to fabric?
Oh, man. Probably growing up, going to our church activities where the women would sit around and they'd be hand tying a quilt. You know, you get those wooden frames out and all the women are sitting around and they'd poke the needle down and I'd be underneath the quilt and I'd grab the yarn and poke the needle back up, right? So that was probably my first exposure. And we'd be making those quilts, you know, to give to people who were less fortunate. And I remember one year, it was shortly after my parents had gotten divorced. And I think it was our first Christmas where my mom was a single mom. And she obviously didn't have a lot of money to give us Christmas presents that year. And I remember my sister and I each got one of those quilts as a Christmas gift under the Christmas tree. And it was both a beautiful and a sad moment, because it's sad because you're like, oh, wow, I'm now one of the recipients of this. You know, that's kind of a sad thing to come to terms with, but also just being so awed by people's, I don't know, generosity and feeling the love of my community, right? So that was probably my first exposure to quilting.
Oh my gosh, that is like the most heartwarming story I've ever heard. Well, and how much of an impact does that have on you as you're growing up and now in your career as a quilter? Obviously, you want to be philanthropic as well. So,
for sure.
Were there certain people in your life that had a creative impact on you early on? Just do the crafts, do what you love.
Yeah, I was always super crafty. I mean, I was always drawing on my hands. You know, I was that weird teen that just hung out in the art room the whole day and walked around school barefoot. I was that weird person. But I was always artsy. And luckily, I had parents who really encouraged that. And I didn't necessarily feel the pressure to go into other jobs or whatever. So luckily, I went to university for art, and I've always felt really supported with my family in being able to do that, which is great.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that career, education career path to quilting. Mm-hmm. How did it go?
So, so I went to a university for painting, and it was Brigham Young University in Utah. I had originally applied and gotten into other art, more art-based colleges like Cornish and Willamette. But I chose to follow my group of friends, my high school group of friends. We all went to BYU together. I was a little scared to go out on my own, on my own adventure, and so I wanted to stay with my friends. And I knew that BYU was a good school, so I went there and I studied painting. And it was both an awesome and a really challenging experience. I was undiagnosed ADHD. I had always been, I don't know, kind of you think of it as the artist mindset, you kind of get lost in your thoughts and you really focus on a project and you don't shower and the stereotype, right?
Yeah.
But when it came to university, that meant that I either aced courses or I failed courses
Mhm.
because either I was really interested and invested in it and like spent all my time on the projects, or it didn't interest me at all. And it was like pulling teeth just to even do an assignment. And so, because I was undiagnosed ADHD, I thought it was me. I thought it was just, I was doomed to fail. I wasn't good at this academic type thing. And so I left university after getting married and having my first baby. I left university just not feeling that I had really accomplished anything. I felt like I had failed. And because I had gotten married and had my first baby in those 4 years of university, I didn't actually finish my degree. I left with 10 credits shy of my degree, which is so frustrating. But now it doesn't bother me. But at the time, I felt like such a failure.
Mhm.
But I thought, well, if I'm not good at this, at least I can just pour everything into being a wife, being a mom, taking care of kids. And so that's what I did for a long time. I poured all of my creative energy into that. So I had 4 children and they were my entire world. I mean, they still are, but
Mhm.
I ended up homeschooling them for 3 years. Everything I did, even like creative wise and artistic wise, was always around them. It was making them costumes or decorating cakes for them or taking family portraits so they were kind of my creative outlet for a good like 10 years until eventually my youngest was old enough to start going to kindergarten, which meant that I did have some time, from 9 to 3 or whatever to actually do something. And then I had to answer that dreaded question that I had been dreading for years. Okay, what do I do now?
Yeah.
Do I like find a regular job and try to make some income for our family, or do I try this artist thing and not really know if I could actually make an income for my family? So, I decided to start writing quilt patterns. And I had had some people in my life who had quilted, fellow moms that I was friends with who had quilted. And I, they were more of the traditional quilter. And so I didn't really appeal to me. But then I came across one day in the fabric store broadcloth. Are you
Mm.
familiar with
Yeah.
broadcloth? It's a very cheap
Yeah.
form
Not
of
cotton.
fabric. And
Yeah.
it's like cotton and polyester,
Yeah.
right? It's like, oh, but it's very, very cheap. And so it's like, I can't even remember. It was probably like $2.69 a yard. It was
Yeah.
so cheap. But I mean, like that meant that I could get like 1 yard of like 50 different solids and then have a palette, like a painter's palette full of all these amazing colors. And I could explore quilting. I could sew things together. And so therefore, like painting became quilting. Like I gave myself this palette of colors, things to cut up and sew together. From day one, I wasn't really attracted to the idea of sewing from another person's pattern. Even to this day, I can count on one hand how many times I've ever sewn something from another person's pattern. because for me, it felt like if I'm going to sit down and paint, I'm not going to sit down and paint the Mona Lisa. Like that's somebody else's creation. I can appreciate it and I can learn from it, but I'm going to sit down and I'm going to create my own thing.
Mhm.
So it's the same thing when it came to quilting. I was like, if I'm going to quilt, I'm going to do every single step from design to pattern writing to creation, right? A to Z. I want full control over all of that.
Yeah.
And then the idea was like, well, if I want to be able to afford to do this, because hello, it's expensive,
Mhm.
even when you're sewing with broadcloth, um, can I get to the point where I can create a pattern that I feel comfortable enough putting out into the market? I had all the skills, luckily, for my university um, background. I had the Adobe Illustrator skills. I was always very, very interested in math. Like calculus was my second passion in high school. So I felt comfortable being able to like, okay, I know that this is doable and it can translate well to other people who want to make this too. So back in 2018 was when I put my first pattern out, and it's just been a whirlwind from there. So,
Wow. So do you remember the first quilt you actually ever made, or did it happen after you started accumulating those color palette of fabric?
oh man, I was trying to think back. I may have sewn some squares together to make a baby quilt for one of my kids. But really the first like true like this is my creation quilt was when I bought the that spectrum of colors and I just started playing. And one of the first ones I made was I sewed tons of strips of color together to make, like a strip panel. And then I cut that strip panel on an angle like 45 degrees or whatever. And then I started sewing them back together again. I just was like playing, but also tackling, bullet points of learn this skill, learn this skill, learn this skill, learn strip piecing, learn like cutting things at an angle and making, like Lone Star type things, right?
Mhm.
So every time I would create something, I wanted to teach myself a new skill. And for my first, I'd say like 10, 12, 15 patterns, that's what they were about. It was like, okay, I want to write a pattern that has something to do with curves because I haven't tackled that yet. So I would like fully immerse myself in curves, get myself to the point where I felt comfortable even teaching other people about curves and then write a pattern for it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally
So,
makes sense. It's like a learning
yeah.
process, and you grow with every pattern that you make. So let's keep
Hmm.
talking about that growing and changing with your style over time. When did you gravitate out of designing your own patterns with triangles and squares and quilterly type designs into the art quilting that you're doing today?
Yeah. So I think from day one, a value that I deeply, deeply, deeply connect with is originality. And so even when I was writing patterns that I wanted to be accessible to other people, I wanted to make sure that my patterns were incredibly, incredibly unique.
Mhm.
That the designs themselves were not something you would easily mix up with another creator's. That they were dramatic, that they were visually impactful, that it felt like you were making a piece of art, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, and I feel like my patterns kind of have that vibe. They're very dramatic. They're very like, I want you to create this crazy, amazing piece of artwork. And it just happens to be a quilt. Um, so I think I'd say probably in the past year or two, I've felt like, okay, I've written, a certain number of patterns, and I'm still feeling the need to like create even more. And it doesn't even have to be something that translates to other people making it too. So I want to make something for myself. I want to make something that's so crazy that there's no way I would want to write instructions to try to tell somebody else how to do that, right?
Yeah.
So that's really what it came down to. And I'm always exploring. I'm always trying to break rules. I'm always trying to think like, okay, cool. Like I'll tell you, I'll give you one example. So this is something that's on my to-do list for this year. I want to make a puff quilt, and you're thinking puff quilt. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. You know, it's even kind of simple-ish.
Mhm.
But I'm always thinking, okay, how can I break the rules with that? How can I turn it into like something so dramatic and beautiful, be like art, and it would want to hang in a museum rather than just lay on your bed. Not to say that one is better than the other, but
Mhm.
I always just want to like break the rules and do something crazy. And so my idea was I want to make a puff quilt out of clear vinyl.
Mhm.
And the interesting part of the puffs wouldn't necessarily be the fabrics themselves, but it would be the stuffing inside. So I
Mhm.
have a bunch of raw sheep's wool from a neighbor of mine, and I've washed it and it's just sitting there in a garbage bag. And so I'm thinking, I'm going to dye this wool like the full spectrum of the rainbow, red to all the way to purple. I'm going to dye this wool and I'm going to like stuff each of my clear vinyl puffs with different colors of wool and create like this beautiful ombre effect of all these puffs in different colors. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like it's modern, but it's also traditional, but it's also breaking all the rules, but it's also super visually dramatic,
Yeah.
right? So that's kind of my flavor.
Yeah, well, I love how you went from, original design in patterns that are accessible to other people to needing more and just exploring your own original design in art pieces. It's
Hmm.
it's a fabulous journey. Okay, so was there kind of a defining moment, like once your kids were grown a little bit more, or perhaps the youngest one was in school, where you felt like, okay, quilting is my thing, it's my art medium. Can I do this for a living? What am I going to do there? Is patterns going to be enough?
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. I think around that time, 2018, was kind of the rise of the indie pattern designer. You're shaking your head, yeah. And so Instagram became popular,
Yeah.
and so I was kind of start. I got onto that bandwagon, and there's just an amazing culture there, and it's still there,
Mhm.
where we encourage each other to promote each other's patterns and designs, but also teach other people those skills. And we've also created this unique community. We're always asking the question, how can we improve the quilting community? How can we bring it into the 21st century?
Yeah.
How can we make sure that we are fairly compensating each other? How can we bolster each other up? What changes can we make? Right. And I've loved being part of that community.
Yeah.
And because of that, that has helped me translate, a hobby into a full-time business. Because this community, we're supporting each other, we're working with the fabric companies, we're working with the magazines, barriers that would have been really hard to access without a community like Instagram, are accessible. Like
Mhm.
I can message a fabric designer directly and they can message me back rather than like having to go through the channels of like contacting HR and contact or whatever.
Yeah.
Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Going through some
So,
form on the website that
oh
nobody ever
my goodness.
answers, or yeah.
Yes, right. So I think Instagram and the pandemic too, really helped, I don't know, just open doors
Mhm.
and create a really great community.
Yeah, and I just love it that, I mean, that is everything that you just said there is everything about why I'm doing this podcast in the first place, lifting people up and sharing their stories. But there's all these things in the community where, we want to be compensated fairly. If I did a lecture in this community, I'd get a certain amount of money. If I did a lecture in the mental health community, I might get paid double. Like it's just something
Mm-hmm.
strange about the whole quilting community that's happening there that we need to fix that. And I think we can work together to do that. But I love
Mm-hmm.
the part of your story where you're talking about lifting other people and, diversity is important and everything, inclusivity is important. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just important that we all lift each other up.
Oh, for sure. I think oftentimes people see it as a spectrum, like accessibility and inclusivity, and then like fair compensation. And
Mm.
so, like, I would come across a lot of people who felt bad about the idea of raising the prices of their patterns,
Yeah.
right? And so, when we would compare with other crafts, mediums, crochet, sewing, garment sewing, whatever, we would say, well, really, our patterns have this much, this much material in them, this much education in them. They really should be priced in this bracket, right? But then we think, oh, but no, that's too much. We want to quilting is expensive already. We want to make it accessible, which we do, but
Mhm.
we got to do both. We got to
Yeah.
make it accessible, but we also need to value ourselves enough to charge what should be charged, right?
Yeah.
So finding that balance, but also instilling in other people that they can do both. Like you can have a $20 pattern, but you can also have, like I have a handful of like $4 patterns on my website too, because I want people to be able to create. And if they don't have 20 bucks, I still want them to be able to
Yeah.
find something that they can make, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So important. Okay, so we're going to take a moment out of the story. We're stepping out and we're going to find out, where are you living now? Because there's a
Mhm.
time somewhere in this timeline you skipped over to Canada, right?
I
So
did. Yeah.
where are you living now, and who are your loved ones that you share your world with every day?
Yeah. So I moved to Canada. Oh, when was it? Probably about 12 years ago. My husband's Canadian.
Yeah.
He's from Nova Scotia. So when we first moved to Canada, we lived there, and then we've slowly moved west, and now we live in Red Deer, Alberta. And so I've got my husband and I've got four kids. The oldest is almost 17, and then the youngest is 10. And we also have a dog and two cats and a snake.
Oh, fun. And I love Red Deer. I want to give a little shout out to Red Deer. I've been to that show a couple times and I've judged the show. So I've had a lot of fun
Yeah.
in Red Deer. And it's okay. So let's get back into the conversation about design, because you are a pattern designer with dozens of patterns on your website for sale. So when you see something in the world that sparks an idea in your head, how do you capture
Mhm.
that? Do you go
Mm,
pencil to paper in sketchbooks or
mm.
digital, or do you just start throwing fabric on the wall?
I will either do pencil to paper or I will go straight into Adobe Illustrator and start creating there. I love Adobe Illustrator because you can create in real size, in like life size, right? So like your palette is as big as you want it to be. So if I make a 3-inch square, it measures 3 inches,
Yeah.
on and so it makes quilt math a lot easier. But I do a lot of pencil to paper. So I have my notebook here. This is my field notebook, and it's got three little sketchbooks inside of it. These are called like field notebooks or field journals, I think they're called.
Okay.
One of them is lined, like
Okay.
lined paper.
Yeah.
One of them is dots, so you can draw, dot to dot to dot, which is good. And then the other one is just blank,
Oh,
right?
nice.
Just blank. And so I am constantly sketching or writing. I find that like my brain goes into that flow state right before I fall asleep or right after I wake up, or if I'm in the shower or I'm driving.
Yeah.
Which makes it a little hard to be able to sketch, write those things down immediately. But yeah, that's my flow
Pull
state
over.
mind. Yeah, I know, right?
Okay, so where do you pull your color inspiration from?
Oh man, I love solids. Okay, so Pinterest is great. Pinterest is a good kind of gateway to kind of train your eye to putting colors into families. So like seeing a photograph on Pinterest of like a beautiful landscape. Let's picture like a beautiful spring meadow with lots of purple and yellow flowers, and the sun is really warm. So everything's really warm. So even though you've got green in there, it's a really warm green because the sun is shining on it. And right. So Pinterest is really great for that, to train your eye to like put colors into families, what goes with. And then I've used a color picker. Have you ever done this?
Mhm.
where like there's websites. I think Color Picker is actually the name of one of the websites where you can take a photograph like that one I was describing, and you can click on an area in that photograph and it will isolate that color
Yeah.
and it will give you all that color's information, not only like the hex code, which is like the name of that color, like the recipe for that color,
Yeah.
but it also give you like the RGB numbers or the CMYK colors. RGB are the color codes that are used for screens, red, green, and blue.
Yeah.
And then CMYK are the colors that are used for printed material.
Yeah.
Then you can take that color and you can start comparing it to the different solids in your stash,
Yeah.
or even color cards of solids. So that's how I've kind of trained my eye to translate vibes, translate photos, translate inspiration into actual fabric, physical fabric, right?
Yeah, I love that. It's a really great tip to take what you're seeing and put it into a program and pick that color. And I love it.
Hmm.
Okay, so how do you tackle a theme that's in your head or an
Hmm.
idea that you feel like you must put out into the world? Like
Mm.
just talking to you, we're going to talk more about your QuiltCon quilts and everything later, but I'm
Yeah.
just so inspired by the fact that you had something in your head, whether it was something that needs to be said to the world or something that was you were working through that it was bothering you. How do you
Hmm.
get that into a quilt?
Oh man, that is like my favorite. It's my favorite thing to do. And honestly, I know you're going to ask this at the very, very end, which is like, what do you want people to take away most?
Yeah.
But it really is that. Like, what do you feel deeply? What do you feel so deeply in your core? What's bothering you right now?
Yeah.
What do you find like immense joy in? And how can you translate that into a quilt? Like giving people the invitation to like, really put some real emotion into a project. I
Hmm.
mean, because we all make beautiful things and we
Hmm.
make beautiful things for people in our family and in our communities. And those are wonderful too. That's not to say that they're less than, these crazy emotional quilts that I'm talking about. But for
Yeah.
me, I feel so deeply and I feel such a connection to like creation and to humanity when I do just that, when I get really vulnerable and I think, what is making me cry right now?
Hmm.
What's in my life that's really, really hard? Well, okay, how could I translate that into a quilt? Which is just crazy.
Yeah.
So for me, oftentimes, like when you look at the body of my work, oftentimes like there's not a lot of connecting themes there. Every quilt is unique in its own like design and message. And so like even like the three that hung at QuiltCon this year, if you hung them side by side, you would not think that they were made by the same person.
Hmm.
And so really every quilt is incredibly unique to me. So I think actually, you know what? There's something I wanted to do with you. It's kind of a surprise and I hope you're up for it.
Go for it.
Okay, so one of the projects I'm working on this year, and this will give you a good example of how I do this process, how I have something in my mind that I want, a feeling I want to get across, and then how I slowly think through and process that into an actual quilt design, a physical quilt design. So I'm working on this project and I'm giving myself these prompts, and it's called Can I Personify a Sawtooth Star?
Oh, okay.
And so if you think of a sawtooth star,
Yeah.
it's a square in the center and it's got two spikes on top, two spikes on bottom, two spikes to the left, and two spikes to the right. So that's a sawtooth star,
Yeah.
very basic. And I was thinking, what if I made a quilt out of lots of sawtooth stars? And they're all relatively the same, but each of them is like given or assigned a human emotion or a human condition. And how does that change how I make that sawtooth star? So, okay, so here's the surprise. I've got my thing here, and maybe this will be a little bit of ASMR, or maybe my microphone won't pick it up at all. We'll see. So, what I did was in my sketchbook that I talked about earlier, I wrote down just a giant list of human emotions and human conditions.
Mm.
Like, I'll give you a list of a couple. So, pain, anxiety,
Hmm.
curiosity, growing, longing, stubborn, cold, hot, sticky, itchy, dizzy, right? So just tons of just description words.
Yeah.
And so I am going to roll my little bingo machine here. I've got a little bingo machine with bingo balls in it.
Okay.
And I've assigned the numbers to those different list of emotions. And so I'm going to roll one, we're going to choose one, and then we're going to talk through how would you translate that into a sawtooth star.
Okay.
All right, so here we go. Let's see if we can get, oh, we got one. Okay, so number 8. Okay. Oh, number 8 is curiosity.
Curiosity.
Okay, so I'll give you a couple tools you can maybe think about when changing the sawtooth star to make it look more curious. So you can think about it in terms of color, like the color of your fabrics, or even like color transitions within the block. You can think about it in terms of texture. So like using different fabrics, using things like vinyl or like waxed canvas or, like, I don't know, the alligator stuff. I don't know. Or even texture within piecing. Like, so are you going to do raw edge applique? Are you going to do reverse applique and cut into it and like have all these frays or what? Or you can think about it in terms of construction and shape. Are you going to change the shape of the sawtooth star, make it bigger or smaller, or shift it, or make it wonky, or completely like deconstruct it, or make it into one corner rather than the other corner, you can warp it, or you can be like really improvisational and have it be like really wonky, or you can be incredibly precise and do like foundation paper piecing, something that's super precise. So curiosity. Now, this is a hard one. Do you have any ideas?
I do have ideas are just spilling out of my brain right now.
Okay.
Okay. So if I was going to try to portray this 8-pointed star with curiosity, I think what I would do is take every point of the star and cut it in half visually with a pocket. So there's a pocket in every point, and something is tucked in there that you can't see. And then also in the center square, I would make it into a pocket with a button so that the final bigger thing is in there completely hidden in the pocket. So your curiosity would be exploring all of those pockets.
Oh my gosh. I love that idea.
I know. I love this kind of thing. This is like totally my jam.
Yeah.
I'm that kind of person who can come up with like 100 ideas, but I don't mind if you don't choose any of them. Like, you know what I mean? Like I can let go. But this is really fun. I love how your mind works and how you're just sparking that creative spirit in people.
So that's usually how it goes. Like something prompts something, and it makes me think, ooh, I want to play with that, or I want to deconstruct that. Actually, you know what? This reminds me of one of the pictures I sent you. There's one of the quilts I sent you is called Moment of Clarity. And it's black and white, and it's kind of based a little bit off of a Lone Star quilt pattern, but there's a story behind it. So, one year for QuiltCon, I put in a Lone Star type quilt, and it actually was one of my patterns called Cosmic Feathers. And the way I had designed it is I had used, like within one of the feathers, there's like 16 diamonds, right? And I had used solids, and the colors I had used within that and the placement of the colors kind of made the diamond almost look 3D. And so the overall Lone Star effect made the whole thing look 3D, like it popped out of your field of vision. It almost looked like you should be wearing 3D glasses when you looked at it. It was really, really cool. And so it got into QuiltCon and it hung at QuiltCon. And when I got the judges' comments back, they were all very positive, but there was one that I used as a prompt, constructive criticism, I guess. But the comment was, could have gone farther to make more modern. And I was like, you want me to go more modern? Do you even know who you're talking to? I was like, challenge accepted. And so what happened is I made Moments of Clarity. Now, Moments of Clarity is the exact same pattern. It's cosmic feathers. But instead of each feather consisting of 16 diamonds,
Mhm.
I cut everything in half. And so one feather now consisted of 64
Wow.
diamonds, and they're tiny. And then I also, like my original cosmic feathers, has these feathers and then it's got sashing kind of in between. I also incorporated tiny diamonds within the sashing as well. And I made, so it's all black and white. So I made these feathers kind of mirror each other. So you get this like crazy, insane design. It totally looks insane. In fact, it doesn't even look like a Lone Star quilt anymore.
No, it doesn't.
I don't know, it's just mesmerizing and boggles your mind, right? So I entered that into the next year's QuiltCon and it got in, and it was kind of my like little kind of FU to the judges.
The answer to that little question.
Yeah, my little answer to the prompt. And I mean, they had no idea that I had done this whole process. But it was taking that prompt and being like, all right, I'm gonna like not only think out of the box, but I'm gonna destroy the box and I'm gonna,
Yeah.
do something insane. So
Oh, I love it. I love how you're giving us a sneak peek into your mind, how you tackle a theme in your head or something that is just worrying you in the world, or you can't just get it outside of your head and you're putting it out into the world in the form of a quilt. And even as a response to a judge, that is so cool. I love it.
hmm
I love how you
hmm
take something that someone could take as like, oh, that hurt my feelings, but you took it and like, wait a minute, I can do something with this and take it on as a
hmm
challenge. Love it.
Totally.
Okay, so let's dive into the business a little bit. So, why the business name Tara Lee Quiltery? How'd you come up with that?
Oh, that's so funny. Okay, so back in the day when I was, still trying to figure out my medium, one of the things I did for a little while was hand lettering, and calligraphy. I've always been really good at those two things, and so I created an Instagram account called Tara Lee Calligraphy.
Oh, okay.
And because it kind of rhymes, Lee is my middle name. And so I had that going for a little while. But then when I transitioned to quilting, I just transferred the name and changed it to Terry Lee Quiltery instead of calligraphy. And I mean, it's a little weird. It feels like, why would you put an ERY at the end of quilt? But for me, it felt like, I don't know, bakery, calligraphy,
Mhm.
quiltery. I don't know. I guess that makes sense. So that's how I came up with that name.
Yeah, it rolls off the tongue nicely. It sounds really good.
Mhm.
So, what do you bring to the world with your business in a nutshell?
In a nutshell, okay, so I've got a wide spectrum of patterns, 30 plus at this point. Um, they're mostly intermediate level. There are some that are relatively basic and beginner level, but really my jam is intermediate. And there's accessible patterns as well. So some that are a lower price point. So patterns is a big thing. And then I don't really sell a lot of fabric. Sometimes I go through a binge state where I love ice dyeing so much. I love using my snow in my backyard to
Mhm.
ice dye fabrics. So sometimes I'll release fabrics. I I don't know, I dabble in things sometimes. Right now I'm working on a t-shirt design. So things like that. So mostly patterns. And then I love just working within the community, right? So
Mhm.
collaborating on community quilts. I don't know.
Yeah, I love it. That is great.
Teaching at guilds. Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah, and
really
we're
what
going
I'm
to
doing
get
right
all
now.
into the teaching and speaking and everything you do in a minute, but
Yeah.
that's pretty good nutshell. Okay, so what was your very first quilt on display, like that you entered a show or
Mm,
something? Or
okay. So it was actually a quilt called Chroma. And it was at QuiltCon. I couldn't remember. I was trying to think back. It was either 2022. I think it was 2022. And what it was as I was learning quilt pattern design and I had so many designs just, you know, I wouldn't necessarily turn every design into a pattern. I was constantly just designing, designing, designing. And there was one that I had designed that was actually a circular quilt and it was made up of all these like triangles that kind of like spiraled out, and it looked very prismatic and very awesome and cool.
Mhm.
And but my skill set was definitely not up to par to be able to write or construct something like that. So I set that aside, and that was like my okay, one day maybe I will tackle that because that's going to be a beast. And I had made friends with Carly Porter, which I know you know, right?
Yeah.
She's one of my dearest quilt friends. She had started a company called Honest Fabric, where people can get panels printed of their own designs.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, well, I can skip the piecing step and just get that beautiful design printed on fabric
Yeah.
and go straight to long arming it. And so that's what I did. I've always loved long arming. For me, it feels like sketching with a thread
Yeah.
with a joystick essentially. And so I was really pleased that I could put that straight on the long arm, quilt it up, and have it hanging in my home. Then when the time finally came, I think this was around 2020, I said, you know what? I bet I could solve this puzzle. I bet I can turn this into something that's pieceable. And not only that, but like into an actual pattern for people to make. And so solving that puzzle was probably the thing I am most proud of, because not only did I make it into something that's actually really easy to piece, but it's also freaking fat quarter friendly. How
Oh,
cool
nice.
is that? So, honestly, like accomplishing that, solving that puzzle, writing it, putting it out into the world, I was so proud of that. And from then on, I've taken that like fat quarter challenge. Can I make this fat quarter friendly? I love that's one of my favorite puzzles to solve. Like I
Mhm.
could fall asleep trying to solve that.
Yeah. And it just goes to show you that as a quilter out in the wild, we can look at a quilt in a show and think, oh, that is so complicated. I would never be able to
hmm
do that.
hmm
But someone who's made it from scratch and thought of it from their own mind could create a pattern that makes it accessible to everyone, right?
Yep,
Yeah.
totally.
Okay,
Yep.
so that was your first quilt on display at QuiltCon.
hmm
What was your first solo show? I remember you saying
Mm.
something about a solo show in Leduc, Alberta.
Yes, 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 yes. I did that, I think last year. It was for the Black Gold Quilters Guild. I think that's what they're called. Definitely Black Gold. Yeah, they contacted me and asked if I wanted to be like their, spotlighted person for their show. And so I was able to hang quite a number of quilts there and also teach a class there. And that was super, super cool. I love local guilds for that.
Yeah.
For sure. They are wonderful at highlighting the people in their community. And also like bolstering, like we talked about before, bolstering people up, like leveling them up, especially the younger generations, like
Mhm.
taking them under their wing and giving them skills or giving them access to long arms or giving them access to shows. Like such a great community. I was trying to think back if there was anything before that show, and I think the first time I actually hung my quilts in a public space was back when we were living in Manitoba. My local library decided to hang a bunch of my quilts just in the library amongst the books. And that was such a cool experience too. So I was just telling my kids yesterday that, because one of my kids said, oh, maybe I'll be a librarian when I grow up. And I said, that would be an amazing job. And I went into all the reasons why a librarian is just way more than somebody who can,
Mhm.
guide you to the right book. Like they're
Yeah.
such an important asset to communities. So,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
that's so true. And I love the part of this story where you're talking about guilds because so many people on this very podcast have told me stories along the way where some mentor, someone in their guild, just encouraged them to just go stand up on the stage and show your first quilt at show and tell. And
hmm
that changed everything for them. Like
Yeah.
it allowed them to be put in front of people and hear the accolades of you did it. And
hmm
it's a great job. So I love what you're saying about guilds. They're so important. Okay. Now, speaking of inspiration, you love this quote. It goes like this: the creation of something new is not accomplished by the intellect, but by the play instinct acting from inner necessity, by Carl Jung. Why is that
Yeah.
meaningful to you?
Oh man. I think about just for me, like I feel it so deeply that I have to create. Like that's like of all the things I was born with, like the instinct to create is like the strongest.
Hmm.
And so I think about when people feel apprehensive about creating something unique or perhaps, straying away from using a pattern and creating something that's totally, from inside themselves. They often think about the barrier of intellect. Well, I don't know this and I don't know that, or I don't know enough about color theory, or my piecing's not quite there, or whatever, right? But honestly, like that desire to create should overshadow that fear of not having the intellect.
Yeah.
And so just like leaning into that play instinct, that instinct of I need to say something with fabric, and just do it, just lean into it, and the intellect will eventually follow because you gain that through experience,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I agree with every word of this conversation. I love it. Okay, so we are going to talk about themes and messaging in quilts later when we talk about the actual quilts. But in everything you create, what's your why?
Probably that desire to need to say something. You
Hmm.
know, I think I come from a tradition where, and maybe not everybody's experience is the same, but in my experience, in my tradition, I wasn't necessarily encouraged to say something loudly. Right. And maybe that's the female experience. Maybe, I grew up in a religious tradition where that was encouraged. But and so I always felt just a little bit stifled. And when I finally felt comfortable to start saying things through creation, through the medium of art, I just have to say it loudly now. And I think oftentimes maybe it's a coping mechanism that feels safer to say it through a quilt
Hmm.
rather than, with my actual words. But yeah, that's my why. I feel like I want to portray an emotion I'm feeling, portray the sadness about something, portray like the like intense joy I feel about something. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So what I'm hearing in a nutshell is that you're really speaking through quilts.
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to give a little shout out to your website, of course. So it's TaraLeeQuiltery.com. There's all
Yes.
kinds of wonderful things we can find there that we were talking about on the podcast today. But community is something that you care about. So
Mm,
tell me some of the things you do with your accessible patterns and with
mm.
charity.
Yeah, for sure. So accessible patterns, that's a huge thing for me. I have started just this past year, I have started putting out what I call like flash FPP patterns. And they're just small foundation paper piecing, one block. And it's usually around a theme. So I've got like a no kings one or a no ice one, or I've got other things that aren't necessarily politically minded, but beautiful things or something to go with a holiday. But it's just a small, singular block, usually 6 or 12 inches or something. And it's only like $4.
Yeah.
You know, so putting out those like small little flash patterns, they're easy for me to do. I can get them all written up in 2 or 3 days and have them out. And then I'm also always donating a portion of those sales to whatever charity I feel guided to that month. So it's always changing. So that's a big thing. Also, like working with community, I have started associating myself with other quilters who also, feel a little bit of rage,
Mhm.
equal parts whimsy and rage, and want to make collaborative quilts together, or even just want to make quilts in general and then auction them off to try to raise funds for whatever. That's been really, really important to me. So those are two ways that, like in my quilting sphere, I love service and giving back. But I'm also doing it outside of quilting. I work a lot with my local soup kitchen. I go there several times a month and have really gotten to know the staff there and even some of the people who are coming in there, and that's been incredibly rewarding. I also love fostering puppies and kittens, so we're constantly
Aw.
doing that, and that's been incredibly rewarding too. But I feel like growing up, I had kind of a vanilla upbringing.
Mhm.
And now as an adult, I just have this desire for diversity.
Mhm.
And so I love surrounding myself with people who are different than me. So I've got neighbors from Ukraine and I've got neighbors from Russia and neighbors from India, and I love spending time with them and learning how to cook their food and doing like celebrating holidays together. So we do that. Also in a community choir. My husband and I sing in a community choir, and that's been incredibly rewarding too. There are a lot of members of the community choir who are part of the LGBTQ community, and that's been incredibly rewarding just to rub shoulders and learn about life with them. So
Yeah. And a part of
yeah,
that that I love is that when you said equal parts whimsy and rage, because that kind of
yeah.
makes me think of, yes, we need to speak out. Yes, we need to make a difference. Yes, we need to share our voices, but we can also protect ourselves at the same time with joy and
hmm
with community, right? I love that part of the story.
hmm
Okay, so speaking of community, you have a newsletter. So tell us what you bring out to the world in your newsletter.
So my newsletter goes out probably about once a month or once every 2 months, not very often. And that's by choice. I'm not the kind of person to constantly be sending things to people. So I'll usually highlight if there's anything new, anything that a new pattern that I put out or whatever. But I'm also telling, what's going on in my personal life, whether I've been to a quilt show recently or what's going on in the world and how that it's affected my art and how I'm learning to give back to whatever. So that's usually what's in my newsletter. Yeah.
Okay. And you're doing some collaborations here and there. So tell us about Ruthlessly Handmade. What happened there?
Oh my gosh, my friend Sarah, you guys all need to follow her. She is incredible. Um, I've known her for quite a while. She's been a tester of mine for years and years and years. One of her super skills is bringing people together. And so she has brought together quite a few people and is constantly pumping out quilts for certain outreach programs or fundraising opportunities or just politically minded quilts that she wants to submit to whatever or hang and whatever or sell and donate to whatever. That's really her bread and butter. And so right now I just finished this block that's behind me. I finished a block for one of her quilts and
Can
yeah,
you
that's been really,
describe
really
it for
good.
us so that we can
Oh,
hear?
you bet. You want to hear? Okay,
Yeah.
so this block behind me is a picture of the world. If you're in space, you can see the world, specifically North America. And but then it's also got Donald Trump in the background. So it almost looks like he is like holding the world. His fingers are kind of like peeking over the edge of the world, and his face is like behind the world a little bit. He's kind of peeking over North America. And coming out from his fingers are like tentacles of black thread, and embroidered within that is the word tariff over and over and over and over,
Wow.
spread all across North America. These black threads, kind of like it looks kind of like spreading mold
Wow. And there's
of
an
tariffs.
ominous look on
Yeah.
his face
Oh,
as
for
well.
sure.
Yeah.
Ominous. Yeah. So that's kind of the idea. So she approached a bunch of makers that she thought would be interested and said, let's do this quilt. And each block, I want you each to make a block of something from 2020, Trump's presidency in 2025 that really affected you personally. So for me, living up in Canada, the thing that affected me most, especially with my business, was tariffs.
Yeah.
So that's the theme of my block, but other people's blocks addressed like cuts to public programs. Every block has its own kind of theme, and mine was tariffs. Yeah.
Yeah. So good. And it's so nice that she's brought a group of artists together, like a dozen artists, each making a block to represent a month of the year, right?
Yep.
Cool.
Yep.
Okay. And you have a new ambassadorship happening
Mm.
soon with Grace Company. So tell me, how did that come about?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I talked about my love of long arming. My personal long arm is a very kind of bottom of the barrel machine. I got it probably like I'm probably like the fifth person to own it, and I've had it for a number of years. It's on its last leg. Honestly, I wouldn't sell it to anybody. It's so it's
Yeah.
so anyway, so long story short, I've been on the hunt for a new long arm for quite a while. I wanted to be able to partner with a company because long arms are crazy expensive.
Hmm.
And I also wanted to be able to work with a company and provide them with a library of digital pantographs that I designed myself, like
Mm.
Terrily Quiltery exclusive.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my idea, and I've been shopping around to different companies. And the Canada branch of Grace Company is actually located in Red Deer.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, yeah, just down the street from me. And so I said, okay, I'm going to start here. I'm going to start with Grace Company. And then maybe a couple years down the road, I will graduate from Grace Company and go on to something um, more top of the line, I would say. So
Yeah.
I'm super excited to partner with Grace Company and be able to, I don't know, there's a whole like, my long arm has gotten to the point where it's holding me back in my
Mm.
artistic journey.
Yeah.
So there's a whole line of quilts and things that I want to explore and mediums I want to explore that I can't do because my long arm is holding me back,
Hmm.
unfortunately. So I'm really, really excited to be able to start doing things. Couching is a big thing. Digital pantograph is a big thing. And I'm just super grateful that Grace is willing to work with me so I can start doing that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can't wait to see how you blossom from here with your long arm skills.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about travel highlights. Have there been any along the way with regards to quilting?
For sure. I mean, going to QuiltCon every year is the highlight of my year for sure. Not only because I get to see my friends and see the crazy, amazing quilts, but the networking that's done there is incredible. I mean, there's no like you can message people over Instagram. It's just not the same as meeting somebody in person
Yeah.
and having that face-to-face contact. So that's been incredible. But the inspiration that I get there is just wonderful. Attending lectures, touring the quilts and talking with people who made them, bouncing ideas off each other. Oh, it's so, so good. So definitely the travel highlight of my year. Also, I've started traveling a little bit for teaching. I started teaching probably in the midst of COVID, so most of my teaching is on Zoom, which I think is still very, very popular. But we're starting to get back into the in-person stuff. And so a highlight for sure was definitely last year I taught in San Antonio
Hmm.
for a retreat for Sotopia, and that was a really, really cool experience.
Oh, I really like Amy, and her booth is always so fabulous at QuiltCon.
Oh yeah.
So that must have been a whole lot of fun. Okay, so you mostly teach via Zoom or locally. You're starting to travel a little bit, but tell us a
Mhm.
little bit about some of your speaking. Do you have a trunk show?
I do have a trunk show. And it kind of the theme that it follows is finding my artistic voice through pattern design. So I go through my patterns in order
Mhm.
and how it kind of like, the skill I taught myself to make that pattern, but also how it slowly developed my artistic voice to what it is now.
Mhm.
So that's kind of my basic trunk show. I'm also working on a couple other lectures that I'm really excited about. One's called Quilts That Speak, so the history and current usage of quilting in activism,
Mhm.
which is a really cool topic. And then the other lecture I thought about developing is like solids, a masterclass. So we would talk about how, kind of like how I talked about before, translating an inspiration or a vibe into actual color selection and really taking your quilts to a whole new level because you chose the right colors, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, it would be very cool to start that one off by telling the story about your very first collection of fabrics was, these solids in polyester.
Uh-huh.
Great way to start it off. Okay, well, that's awesome. Okay, so is there a quilt or quilt project that's been most memorable for you?
Okay. So when I was thinking about that, there's one quilt that I sent you a picture of called Seeing Stars.
Hmm.
And it's made up of, I think, almost 1,000 yo-yos.
Wow.
That was one of those ones where summer was coming up. I knew that I was gonna, we had a couple of road trips planned. I was gonna be on the road a lot. I am not an EPP person. Are you an EPP person?
Well, no, I've tried. I have done a lot of hexagons and English paper piecing just for fun, just to have something to do. But yeah, I keep
Mhm.
gravitating back towards my machine.
Yep, I know, right? And I think it's because I'm not a slow stitcher. My brain works fast. I'm constantly moving on to the next idea. I got to do it fast or it's never going to get done. So, but I knew I was going on these road trips, so I needed something to do with my hands. And so I thought, well, I'm not going to do EPP, but I could make a ton of yo-yos.
Mhm.
So that's what I did. I cut out a bunch of circles and I put them in this tackle box type thing. And I had my threads and my needles, and I just took that tackle box around with me the whole summer. So anytime we were going camping, anytime my kids did a lot of like LARPing, which is where you dress up in medieval clothing and you do like sword fighting and go to Renaissance fairs. So I took my tackle box with me to that. Whenever my kids would go swimming or have a basketball game, I had my tackle box with me. And so I just spent the whole summer making 1,000 yo-yos.
Wow.
And when it came time to sewing them together, I knew I wanted to potentially try to enter it into QuiltCon, but it wouldn't be a quilt if I sewed them together because technically it needed a top layer, a batting layer, and a
Yeah.
backing layer. So I decided on a kind of a unique way to turn them into a quilt. So what I did is I went straight to my long arm, loaded backing and batting, and a solid quilt top that I had marked a grid on. And then I would take a yo-yo and I would set it on that grid. And I would take another yo-yo and set it right next to it on the grid. And I would take my long arm and I would stitch back and forth, just making like a little dash mark that connected the two yo-yos. So I go
Mm.
back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And then I wouldn't even break thread. I would lift up my presser foot, put another yo-yo down and attach that one next, back and forth and back and forth. So I attached the yo-yos to the quilt top using the long arm, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So that's how I made that quilt. Some of the yo-yos I even split in two. So the circle of fabric I would use to make that yo-yo would be made out of two fabrics. It'd be half one fabric, half another fabric.
Yeah.
And so when you would make that yo-yo, it would turn into a half circle of one color and a half circle of another color. And the way I situated those on the quilt top, you get the look of sawtooth stars.
Yeah.
And so that's why I called it Seeing Stars, because if you kind of crossed your eyes, they would look like
Yeah, it's
sawtooth
so
stars.
cool. And can you
Yeah.
find that somewhere like on your website or something?
Oh man, that's good idea. On my Instagram for sure.
Okay.
It's currently hanging in my front entry in my house. Anyway, so I
So
entered
we
it
just
to
have to come
QuiltCon.
over then.
I know, right? It did not get into QuiltCon, but because I had used all the fabrics I had used to make that quilt were Ruby Star Society, I messaged them directly and I said, I made this quilt and I really just want to just put it in your booth. Here, can you take it? Just take it. So they put it in their booth for
Oh,
QuiltCon that year, which was really,
nice.
really an honor. Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool. Okay. So in your creative practice, what brings you joy?
What brings me joy? Consuming other people's art. Like I've talked about how deeply I feel that need to create. When
Mhm.
I see that feeling in other people, oh, that just brings me so much joy. And it's one of those things where like you get teary-eyed when you see somebody participating in something that they're so passionate about.
Yeah.
Like I think about, the QuiltCon Awards, whenever they announce the kids section, the
Hmm.
children's section, and we're all getting teary-eyed. We're like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, it's so exciting, right? But it's because that like, oh my gosh, they felt that seed to create something and they created it and it's so beautiful. And we just want to just like,
Yeah.
just support them in that and just like push them forward and be like, keep doing it, right?
Yeah.
So whenever I feel that, like I'm constantly chasing that feeling. So it could be through other people's quilts. It could be like my own kids' music concerts or beautiful music, singing beautiful music in my choir or
Yeah.
just anywhere. Like I'm constantly chasing that feeling of seeing other people create.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
passion. I love it. Okay. So right now we're going to take a quick break. And then when we come back, we're going to talk all about Tara's studio space, the quilts, of course, and what's coming soon. We'll be right back. Have you ever heard me announce something on the podcast and thought, wait, how did everyone else know about this but me? Here's the secret. The people on my newsletter hear about everything first. Every Tuesday, they get a preview of the newest Quilter on Fire podcast episode before it lands in their podcast app. Every Friday, they get my weekly roundup with the latest tools, tips, and tricks, where I'm off to next in the world, my latest YouTube video, and things that caught my attention in the quilting world. And if you're interested in quilt travel, this is the big one. Newsletter subscribers are the first to hear about international trips. My Japan tour filled in less than 2 weeks, and I have more incredible destinations in the works. When those trips are announced, newsletter subscribers get the news first. So if you don't want to miss a podcast, a travel opportunity, or something exciting happening in the Quilter on Fire community, get yourself on the list today. It's easy. Just head to quilteronfire.com, scroll all the way to the bottom of the page, enter your email address, and you're in. Join thousands of quilters who are already getting the inside scoop. That's quilteronfire.com, scroll to the bottom, sign up, and I'll see you in your inbox. And we are back. Tara, can you tell us about your studio space? Where do you create?
Yes. My studio space is kind of split into two chunks. I've got the upstairs chunk, and then I've got the basement chunk. So the basement is where the long arm is, the fabric storage, and the pattern storage is. But where I spend most of my time is upstairs on my main floor. I share a room with my husband. He's got his office, and then I've got my little office. So I've got a standing desk, and it's close to a window, and it's always changing. I'm either sewing on it or using it as a workspace for my laptop and papers.
Mhm.
And then behind me is my giant design wall. That just covers a full wall of this room in here. And so I'm constantly just throwing stuff up there and working through things. But yeah, two spaces because I need daylight to work. I don't know
Yeah.
about you. So, and I didn't feel like taking up our entire main floor with the long arm. So I knew I needed to kind of split my space in half. Yeah.
Yeah. And that daylight is really nice.
Mhm.
Okay. So what's your favorite time of day? Speaking of daylight.
Oh, my favorite time of day. Probably I'm a slow starter. So I got to get up early to get my kids out the door. But then as soon as I get the house back to myself, I will sometimes take a nap or take a shower. It takes me a while to get my wheels going. But once they're going, I'd say about like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock is my favorite time of day because really the creative juices are flowing. I'm working, I'm getting into my groove. And then my kids are coming home from school and I get to hear about their day. And then I'm trying to figure out dinner, right? So 1 or 2 o'clock is usually where I peak.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds good. So what's the best thing you do for your own self-care?
My own self-care. Getting out of the house and singing in my community choir or helping out at the soup kitchen for sure is like the best medicine. I also love taking my dog there's an off-leash dog park near me that's like on a river and it's huge and like there's a lot of wildlife and deer and even moose walking through it. So
Yeah.
taking my dog on a walk there brings me a lot of joy. So
Oh, that's really interesting that you answered the self-care question with caring for other people in the community and caring for your dog. It really does give you that sense of caring for yourself as well, though, doesn't it?
Yes.
Taking
Oh,
care
for
of others.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've been waiting for this. I've been waiting for this. This is the exciting part. We want to talk about the quilts. So we've
Yes.
already touched on Seeing Stars, which
Yeah.
is a really fun quilt. You did
Uh-huh.
mention Chroma briefly, but there's two quilts for Chroma, wasn't there? So tell me about those.
Yeah. Yeah. I sent you a picture. The black and white one was the one that I told the story about hanging in QuiltCon. That one was really, really cool. Two-tone, black and white. The way I quilted it is especially special. I used like 8 different colors of thread.
Uh,
And with the way the pattern is designed, the closer you get to the center of the circle, the smaller the pieces are. And so I did that kind of same thing with the quilting. The closer you got to the center of the quilt, the more densely it's quilted.
yeah.
And because I used 8 different colors of thread kind of in these like their own little section, the closer you get to the center of the quilt, the more densely it's quilted and the more it kind of glows that specific color, if that makes sense.
Especially on
Red,
the
orange,
black
yellow, green. Yeah.
in the
Uh-huh.
center. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
And so that was a really cool way of quilting it. The other chroma is the same pattern, but instead of 2 tones, I use 16 different tones of fabric.
Wow.
And it creates this spiral of 16 different colors kind of warping into the center.
Yeah.
Yep, so that's chroma.
It's really cool. The real kind of rainbow colored one with the black and white kind of looks like a take on the Fibonacci swirl, right? It's
Yeah,
really cool.
yeah.
Okay, awesome. So let's talk about moment of clarity.
Okay, so moment of clarity
That's the one that you
was,
mentioned earlier, right? With the
yeah.
white and black that had all the different, I don't know, you've taken a star and you've kind of like explode. It almost looks like one of those toys that comes down to nothing and then it comes into a ball. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Kind of
yeah.
reminds me of that, but
Yeah.
it's really cool. So that was the answer to the judge saying,
Mm-hmm.
let's give you constructive criticism.
Yeah.
Okay, so we did talk about that one already.
Yes.
Let's talk about plateau.
Ah, plateau. Okay, so plateau is a new one for me. It hasn't been seen a lot in the public. I've maybe posted it on my Instagram maybe once or twice, but I made it to submit to this last QuiltCon and it didn't get in. So it's still kind of, I'm kind of holding it back until it has its, official big debut sometime. But plateau. The idea behind it is I wanted to do these kind of rivers of color, which is a little bit of a signature look or motif for me. I'm
Mhm.
always kind of doing these organic, wavy, kind of crazy looking rivers of color. But I wanted it to look like it was falling down like a waterfall and then like kind of like playing on this plateau and kind of waving back and forth and then falling again off of the plateau. And so how I did that is I took 3 sheets of paper and the first and third sheet, I drew straight lines on
Mhm.
it. But the second sheet, I drew those waves, right?
Mhm.
And then I taped the papers together and sat them on a desk so that one was completely, straight to me. The other was on the surface of the table. So it kind of looked like it was,
Yeah.
playing on a table. And then the third was falling off of the table, right? And so I took a picture with my camera. And so you had that perspective of like, here's a waterfall far away. Now it's playing on a plateau and now it's falling down that plateau.
Yeah, it is
Um,
so cool. I have to tell you, you need to go find this on Instagram. So let's just give a plug to your Instagram right now. Where can they find this?
so at Tara Lee Quiltery
Okay, so that's easy
is
to
my,
find.
yeah.
But I'm kind of astonished by this quilt because when I'm looking at it, it looks like it's against a wall on a table and falling over the edge of the table, but it's
Hmm.
actually hanging flat on a wall. So
Hmm.
it's really cool. It's got this really unique perspective and it looks like it's trapuntoed and puffy, where
Hmm.
all the rivers
Hmm.
are flowing and the colors are just really cool. It also looks like you've just got shaded the colors are shaded to a darker shade on different parts of the quilt as well. It just
Yeah.
makes the perspective pop out, right? I love it.
Yep.
So cool. So that was really cool. Okay, so now we want to get into talking about the three quilts that got into QuiltCon this year. So first, let's talk about, well, which one do you want to start with? Let's finish with the one
Mm,
that won the award. So let's start with
sure.
the other two.
Yeah, sure. Let's do Second Sight first, and that's
Okay.
the one with all the couching.
Yes. So cool. So cool.
Yeah, super cool. We were talking about those rivers of color. You can kind of see that kind of same feeling in that quilt. There's all these rivers of color, but they're done with couching with
Yeah.
yarn. That was a quilt that I had submitted several times into QuiltCon and was just not getting in for whatever reason. My main guess is because there's not really a good category for it.
Yeah.
It's a whole cloth quilt, so there's no piecing. It's definitely not minimalism. There's a lot going on there. And anyway, so I ended up putting it into the handwork category, even though there's not really any handwork to it. There's couching, but I'm using a machine to couch, right? So, but that quilt was kind of a teaser into what I would love to explore with my new long arm. Really getting into couching, really playing a lot with the free motion step of quilting. I've played a lot with design. I've played a lot with piecing, but like I said, I've felt very stunted in playing a lot with my actual quilting step.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I love the story you told about how you got the coaching on there with the straw and trying to figure that
Oh.
out. Tell me that story.
Okay, so I hinted at my machine being a very, very basic machine. And so, in order to couch on my machine, there's no options for other feet with my
Yeah.
machine. It's just the one foot. And so, in order to couch, you need to have your yarn going through your hopping foot, but at a very specific spot so that the needle catches it.
Yeah.
And so, regular couching feet have like different diameter openings
Yeah.
depending on like the gauge of the yarn
Yeah.
or string that you want it to go through. So in order to couch with my machine, I had to unspool a lot of yarn, make it nice and loose and accessible, and kind of like thread it over my shoulder. And then I had to like duct tape a metal straw to the front of my long arm, have it go through the metal straw to kind of guide it to the right spot, to where
Yeah.
the hopping foot is. And then I had to create pretend couching feet with cardboard and tape that cardboard to the hopping foot with a very specific open, like I had to use drill bits to drill through the cardboard to get the perfect circle that's just the right, size to the yarn that I was using. Anyway, it was a lot of duct tape.
The extents will go to get a quilt done. But
Yeah.
the effect is amazing. I'll just give it a little description here. It is a beautiful, huge whole cloth quilt, really. Like it looks like a giant piece of hand dye or something.
Hmm.
Like some kind of big tie-dyed or hand-dyed piece. And it's got this gorgeous couching from the center out. And it's this kind of signature quilty, brainy vibe that you have going on that's really cool. And the colors are like neons. They're just popping right out. It's just really cool. And it's very exciting that it got into
Hmm.
QuiltCon because it's
Hmm.
very unique for not something that's normally seen at QuiltCon, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that's really cool. So cool that that got in. Okay, let's move on to the next one.
Okay, so the second one was called Eye on Gaza. And this was one of those quilts that, like I said, when I feel something super deeply, I have to just shout it from the rooftops, but with fabric.
Yeah.
And so that was the specific quilt. I had felt a deep connection with the people of Gaza and the suffering that they were going through.
Mhm.
And so I made this quilt in response to that. And so it's a picture of my eye. And I'll tell you the process of how I made that. So I took a picture of my eye and I turned it into it's fairly close up and I turned it into a black and white image. And then I made it into, I think, 12 different colors, all the way from black to white and gray in between.
Yeah.
So I split it into like 12 different tones.
Yeah.
And then with each of those tones, I made it into a grid of squares, of 3-inch squares. And depending on the tone that was in that square, let's say like one square was covered pretty much with all black,
Hmm.
then I knew that that square was going to be a 3 inches of a dark fabric.
Hmm.
In this particular case, I chose a picture of a mother in Gaza, and she's embracing her child who had passed away and was wrapped up in the white burial shroud. And so it's a very hard-hitting image.
Yeah.
And so that 3-inch square would be the full picture, 3 inches of that picture. All the way to white. Let's say there was a 3-inch square where it was mostly completely white. I would fill that 3-inch square with the teeniest, tiniest version of that same picture. I would shrink it down
Yeah.
to 1/4 of an inch and surround the rest of that with enough white fabric to make a 3-inch square.
Yeah.
It created this optical illusion in the end of my eye, even though it's just a bunch of 3-inch squares of
Yeah.
varying. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was so cool. I got to interview you in front of that quilt at QuiltCon. And when I was looking at the quilt, I was too close to sort of see the eye. But when I was looking through the camera, I was recording you on, the eye was plain to see. So it was really cool to see that effect. And the further back I went, the cooler it was. And you don't really realize until you come up close that it's that same kind of sad picture, horrific
Mhm.
picture,
Mhm.
over and over and over again, like 100 times. I don't know how many blocks you have, but you can
Yeah.
see that it's large in the black ones and it gets smaller and smaller as you go. So what a fascinating way to create a quilt and to tell a story that's so meaningful.
Yeah.
And it really is hard hitting because at first you don't have any idea what it's about. And as you get closer, you think, oh
Mhm.
my gosh, the picture. And then as you read about it even further, it just tells the whole story. So I love that.
Yeah, for sure.
I loved every minute of talking about the quilt. So I promise at the end of this podcast, I'll tell you where to go to watch the video that we did at QuiltCon. So
Mhm.
let's talk about the winning quilt now.
Oh, for sure. Okay, so the winning one was actually my least favorite of the three,
Yeah.
if we're being completely honest.
Yeah.
But I mean, I love it. But it's called Look Close, Judge Me. And the prompt that I kind of gave myself was I wanted to create a quilt where I wanted to invite people to come up close and like inspect me, because that's what we're
Mhm.
all doing at those quilt shows. Like
Yeah.
we're being in our heads, we're constantly going up and like maybe finding things that aren't quite perfect, or we're saying to ourselves, why didn't my quilt get in
Hmm.
when something like this got in? Or does that mean I'm not enough? Like I'm not doing enough, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not accurate enough, right? So
Yeah.
I wanted to really explore that feeling, explore that message, and even like put it on display and invite people to think about it, you
Hmm.
know? So I created a very traditional design. It's like an
Hmm.
Irish chain,
Yeah.
with some sawtooth stars in there. And then I chose the text, "Look close, judge me," and I incorporated the text within the piecing. So it almost looks like the text is like overlaid on top of the quilt design.
Hmm.
And then, but as I was making it, anytime I would make a quote unquote mistake,
Hmm.
I would purposely leave it in. So when seams weren't matching up, or when I cut something slightly small and oh no, it's going to fray, I left it in.
Hmm.
When my thread broke on during quilting and it, made a nasty nest on the back of my quilt, I left it in,
Yeah.
right? So I was challenging myself to not fix anything.
Yeah.
I was still being very accurate when I was working. Like I was doing my quote unquote my best,
Hmm.
right? But I was not altering myself at all.
Yeah.
And then after the quilt was done, I went back in with red embroidery thread and circled all the mistakes.
Mm. Yeah.
Kind of like you're grading your own paper with a red marker
Yeah.
and you're circling all those mistakes and you're inviting people to come up and find them and talk about them and say like, I would not have considered that a mistake, or she didn't circle this and I would have, so you're really playing on that idea of us judging each other
Hmm.
when we really shouldn't be.
Yeah. It's so true.
Yeah.
And I just loved talking to you in front of the quilts where you could point things out. We have this interview on the YouTube channel, but the thing that was interesting that when I was talking to you about each quilt, a little bit of crowds were forming because they wanted to hear about it. And
Mhm.
it's like you've created three cutting edge quilts that you might not normally see in QuiltCon because I think QuiltCon is looking for those unique stories. They're more about the story, they're more about the design, they're more about seeing something they haven't seen before. So
Mhm.
I think that's kind of a winning combination that you have there.
Mhm. Thanks.
Okay, so you're known for bold design, meaningful
Mhm.
storytelling. But what
Yeah.
happens when your quilts are speaking out loud at a show like this? Like, have you had any interactions with people or heard any
Mhm.
reactions?
Oh man. If you're anything like me, like you see your quilt hanging and you have this moment of, pride and feeling so touched and honored and excited, but at the same time you feel really weird
Yeah.
about going up and standing there and like being like, this is my quilt.
Yeah.
Hi, this is my quilt.
Yeah.
It feels weird. And maybe
Mhm.
that's the female in us. I don't know. We need to get
Yeah.
a little bit more, get a little bit more masculine energy and really own our creations and
Yeah.
be proud of them. But so this time around, the Ion Gaza one in particular, I struggled a little bit. When it got in, I was incredibly honored. It had been rejected the year before. So it got in, and I was incredibly honored because I feel like the message that it had was something that needed to be had
Yeah.
at QuiltCon. And so I was grateful that the message was going to be on display. But I didn't necessarily want me as a maker tied to the quilt, not because I was ashamed or anything, but I was like, this is not about me. Like
Hmm.
that quilt, I felt like it was more important to be about the message and less about the maker.
Hmm.
And so for a while, I was like, I wish I could submit it anonymously.
Hmm.
But eventually I decided, okay, it's going to be tied to me. Let's experience everything that has to do with that. I was a little scared. You never know. It's a controversial topic, so I didn't know if I was going to get backlash or or whatever, how people were going to react to it. But
Yeah.
I decided to spend a lot of my time at QuiltCon just among that quilt, but kind of in the background. So people weren't necessarily aware that I was there. So I could kind of spy on people's reactions when they saw the quilt. And that was an incredibly touching experience. I decided to do kind of a little bit of a social experiment to see people's reactions, to see, kind of what was the percentage of people who had a positive or emotional response to the quilt, or it sparked, it sparked a discussion, versus someone who had kind of a negative reaction to the quilt or found that it was off-putting or quickly moved on because they were offended by the subject matter. And luckily, it was, I'd say like 95 to 5%, 95% public, or positive, and 5% not so positive. But watching the 95%, seeing people talk about the subject matter, um, even getting emotional or embracing each other over the subject matter, or bringing their children around the quilt. Oh, that was the hardest. I was
Yeah.
always crying when a mother would be in the midst of her children and showing them that quilt and embracing their children around that quilt. It was, oh, life changing for
Wonderful.
sure.
Yeah. I mean, for me right now, it's so cool to just hear about the reactions. And I love that. Okay. So let's talk about some of the stuff that's coming soon for you. Big news coming soon. You've got a new course that you're creating. So tell
Mhm.
us about that.
Yeah. So this year, I've got several things in the works. I'm always working on something, but I'm working on a course called Design Your Own Fat Quarter Friendly pattern.
Okay.
And it's a course that I actually taught last year at the Sotopia retreat. They were kind of my guinea pig group of people to help me develop the course. And I'm slowly refining it, refining it. I think I'm going to turn it into an online course just because I love teaching people design, but also being able, like giving them the skills to crack that amazing puzzle of how do you make something fat quarter friendly.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's the course that I'm writing on right now.
Okay. And you've got a project coming up that's kind of an ongoing series on Instagram, or is that already happening?
I'm recording the first video this week, and it's the Can I Personify a Sawtooth Star?
Oh,
So
that was so
you were
fun.
kind of, I know, right? So,
I was the
so
guinea
I'm
pig.
actually, yeah, I'm going to be giving myself those prompts and actually physically making the blocks, and eventually it'll turn into an entire quilt of probably 49. I'm guessing 49 Sawtooth Stars, 7 by 7. But yeah, so I'll be making videos as I make each one of those, and I'll probably be like plugging the next one, like rolling for the next block at the end to
Yeah.
invite people to make their own version of whatever the prompt is.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's going to be really fun. I think that'll if people decide to participate along with me, I think that'll really expand their minds. Even just talking to you about curiosity, I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that.
So fun.
It'd be really cool to learn from each other through those
Yeah.
prompts.
Oh, that will be so fun. So you'll be translating an emotion or idea into a quilt, putting it out into the world on Instagram with prompts and parameters, thinking outside the
Mhm.
box type of thing. So
Yep.
where can they follow you again on Instagram? Let's remind them.
Tara Lee Quiltery. So
Oh,
Tara Lee and then quilt and then ERY.
awesome. So that's
Hmm.
easy to find. Okay, so now it's time for the lightning round robin. It's a
Sure.
series of rapid fire questions and it's super fun. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay, what's your favorite tool or notion?
My favorite tool or Notion. Well, can Adobe Illustrator be a tool?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Yeah, that's a
I
good
mean
one.
that's my language. I just love designing on there and constantly playing with design. So yeah,
Okay,
Adobe
and what
Illustrator for sure.
what triggers inspiration for you?
Oh, what triggers inspiration? Um, Getting out into the world, being exposed to diversity and other forms of art for sure.
Okay. How many UFOs do you have going on at once in your studio?
Okay, so yeah, I feel like there's two types of UFOs. There's current UFOs, there's like living UFOs, and then there's dead UFOs. Am I
Yeah,
right?
yeah, you are.
Like living UFOs, there's not very many because like I get so excited about something and I like, completely immerse myself into it and all the way to completion. But occasionally there'll be those like dead UFOs that like you started 3 or 4 years ago and they're like collecting dust, right? So I have quite a few of those, if I'm
Yeah.
being honest. I probably have like 20 of those. Yeah.
Okay, so what motivates you to get out of bed in the morning?
Oh, what motivates me? Well, my dog and my kids, I have to get out of bed for them.
And then you go back to bed.
And then I go back to bed. But like,
So good.
usually it's oh man, getting in that creative flow, like working on a project where like you forget to eat because you're just so excited to just see the next step,
Yeah.
right? So that's usually what gets me out of bed.
Okay, what's a skill you'd love to learn?
I'm dabbling into digital pantograph
Mm.
and I'm really excited to like immerse myself in it and become an expert on it, right? So that's something I really want to get into.
Yeah, and that'll be really good with Grace Company, right?
Hmm.
Okay, have you had any weird, crazy, or funny fan moments?
Oh, I think it was my first QuiltCon. It was in Atlanta. And I brought my aunt with me who she sews an occasional quilt, but she's not like a quilter. But she loves to travel. So when I asked her, hey, would you come to QuiltCon with me? She's like, absolutely. So I had her with me and we were walking down the street, like to our hotel or something. and somebody yelled out the window, it's Tara Lee Quiltery. And my aunt turned to me and she's like, what in the world just happened?
Uh, Sweetest thing ever.
Yep.
Your family famous moment. That's
Mhm.
awesome. Okay, so has there been a mentor who's really influenced you along the way?
Mm. So I had an older lady who lived in my neighborhood back in the day in Manitoba who was a fellow quilter. I went over to her house several times. I was helping her reorganize her basement. She was having health issues and I wanted to clean up her quilting space for her. So we were quilting friends. And then one day she said, "If I bought a long arm, would you come over and use it?" And I said, "Well, don't buy a long arm just for me. But if you did buy a long arm, yes, I would come over and use it." So she bought a long arm so that I would come over and use it.
Aw.
But she really was like such an amazing and integral part in my quilting journey. Definitely leveled up because I was introduced to long arming. So shout out to Mary Shaver. And then as far as there are some people within the industry that have really helped me level up my skills and been amazing cheerleaders. Libs Elliott is one of them. Alexia Marcel Abeg from Ruby Star Society is another one. Interacting with those two individuals like completely leveled up me in the industry and helped me grow, which is amazing. I hope I can do the same thing for people along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What's your proudest accomplishment?
probably my kids. They're getting to the ages now, 10 to 17, where like, they're really coming into themselves and developing their own talents and even like trying to decide what they want to do for university and stuff. But just seeing how much creation and like fostering that creative spirit in the next generation
Mhm.
has been incredibly rewarding for me to just see the potential in them and like support it and push it and just now I get to reap all the rewards, I guess I'm
Yeah, well, I mean, it's
pushing that.
such a
Yeah.
huge deal to be a parent and bring a little one into this world. Never mind, do it 4 times over.
Hmm.
And yeah, there's a lot of pride in the fact that wow, these are just good humans, right?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I love that part of it too. Okay, do you have any furry friends in your studio?
I do. I have my dog Chase. He's down here. He was dreaming just a couple minutes ago and doing his little dreaming barks. So I was like, oh, hopefully she can't hear that. But he's a rescue dog and he is just the best thing ever. The
Aw.
best. Yeah.
Love it. Okay. Well, thank you for braving the lightning round, Robin. That was really fun. So I've mentioned your website at taraleequiltery.com where we can find all the things we've talked about. And as far as the quilts, we can often find those on your Instagram channel. If you're scrolling away, I'm telling you to grab a cup of tea because you'll be there for a while. So that is Tara Lee Quiltery on Facebook and Instagram. Now,
Hmm.
as we wrap up, Tara, what do you want people to take away most from our conversation today?
Yeah. I was thinking about that and I wanted to give people the invitation to think about what do you feel deeply in your life? What's making you cry? What's making you laugh? Like what's really making you feel a lot? And is that showing up in your quilt? And if not, giving yourself the permission to explore that.
Oh,
It could be something really hard, divorce, sickness,
yeah.
whatever. It could be something amazing. But have you designed a quilt specifically around that?
Mhm.
Have you even dig down in the surface and see what's underneath there and how it can affect your work?
Oh,
So
I love that. I love that. What a great way to end the podcast. Good messaging to end with. Tara, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
you're welcome. Thank you, Brandy. It's been awesome.
Okay, so that was my show with Tara Evans of Tara Lee Quiltery. One thing she does that I like is speak her mind unapologetically. She's brave in her quilting, and it's a great example for us all. A real highlight for me was getting to interview her in front of each of her 3 quilts at QuiltCon that they really focus on the message. And the message is in those 3 quilts where it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to put a brainy free motion couch design on a modern quilt. It's okay to speak a message that hits you hard with grief through your quilt design because you're dealing with that inside your head. It's all okay. And she truly opens up the dialogue and gives the viewer permission to do that. So please go over to the Quilter on Fire YouTube channel and watch that great interview with the stories of those 3 quilts at QuiltCon while she's standing right in front of them. The raw feelings in that moment were so great. And today on the podcast, I loved sharing the story of Tara Evans of Tara Lee Quiltery with you. Quilter on Fire is now on YouTube, and it's packed with brand new weekly content. What's waiting for you? Fun and easy tutorials to follow, exciting unboxings, exclusive interviews with top quilters and artists at the biggest quilt shows like Houston and QuiltCon. If you love Quilter on Fire on the podcast, you're going to be blown away by our YouTube channel. Don't miss out. Subscribe to Quilter on Fire on YouTube today. Let's ignite your passion for quilting. Thank you for listening to the Quilter on Fire podcast. Remember to rate, review, and follow us on Apple Podcasts. Your support helps me reach more quilters just like you, striving for that perfect quilty lifestyle. Click on those 5 stars and share what you loved most about today's episode. Don't forget to hit the follow button if you haven't already. With new episodes dropping weekly, you won't want to miss out on the inspiring stories and tips we have in store. Until next time, dream big and have fun in the studio with the Quilter on Fire.